Welcome to the PacMam Podcast. Here you will find Dr. Cindy Elliser and Kat McKeever, researchers at Pacific Mammal Research, talking all about marine mammals. We will have a variety of ways to share information with you through discussing research articles and news stories, interviews with other researchers, and more. Join us to learn more about marine mammals and have some fun.
Welcome to the PacMam Podcast. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Kat.
And this normally would be our time to do a marine mammal highlight episode, but because it's the end of the year, we did this last year as well. We thought it would be fun to just kind of recap what we were most excited about, what we learned, what we're looking forward to next year, just kind of a recap of the year and what we're looking forward to. So we had a good time doing it last year, so we figured we'd do that again this year, and everybody's getting ready for the holidays and stuff. So we thought we'd just do a little fun tidbits information this time. So that's why we didn't have a you choosing which animal we were going to do this time. So we'll bring that back.
Yeah. So in case you're wondering where that was, that's why.
That's why. And I meant to put a post about like that we're not doing that, but that it's the end of the year and things are getting kind of crazy. So I apologize for not letting you guys know. But we hope you enjoy this one because it's just fun to kind of look back and see all the cool stuff that we learned this year.
And I actually had a lot of fun going back and like just reviewing a few of them because we do kind of forget we cover so much that like I kind of forget all the different things that we've covered over the course of the year. So it was really fun to look back.
I was like, I gotta remember. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, it was fun.
Dive back in. Yep. So I think Kat has something that she wants to talk about.
I do. So before we get into today's podcast, I wanted to just remind you guys, it is the end of the year and our annual fundraiser is open and still receiving donations up until the end of the year. So if you would like to continue to support our work here in the Salish Sea online, providing more educational resources, this podcast, doing our active scientific research, please consider giving a donation. Everything we receive from you guys goes straight back into funding all of our programs. So we will leave the link for that down in the show notes. I believe you can find it at donorbox.org/PacMam2022. But we'll leave that link for you down below. So yeah, please, if you would like to see more of this and have us continue what we're doing, please consider leaving a donation.
And we are a very small nonprofit, so every dollar counts and helps us continue our mission. So you can go to our website, PacMam.org, to find that link to the donor box. You can also go, we have a Facebook fundraiser going. You can also even go on Instagram, and we also have a fundraiser going through there. So any of those locations that you add on or enter, or Giving Tuesday, that I think that portal is still open too. For that, is that closed now?
It's the same portal that we're using. Yeah. Perfect. So that's the donorbox.org/PacMam2022.
Perfect. So yes, please, if you have the ability to do that, please, it really helps us out. And if not, you can share with others that might be interested. That would be very helpful as well. So we thank you for your support and listening and monetarily and support and all the ways that you guys support us. We appreciate it very much. So with that, we're going to start. We have about 4 questions that we are going to pose to each other and see if we agree or disagree on or which ones we like the best. So our first question, let me pull it up so I have it correctly, was what was your favorite podcast episode that we did this year and why? And so this covers interviews, it covers journal reviews, and also covers our marine mammal highlights. So we have a wide variety to pick from. So Kat, what was your favorite episode?
Ooh, so I went all the way back to the beginning of this year because my favorite was, we're going to have, oh, good. Okay. So that means we're not gonna have the same one. Right. So my favorite was actually the interview episode that we did with Rich Reels from Smelts. So if you guys have not listened to that episode, I believe it was like one of the first ones we did in January of this year. And Rich is the founder of Smelts, which is basically a nonprofit that is creating and initiating ropeless fishing technology to help prevent marine mammal entanglements. And you know, we both love Rich and he's just awesome, but it was just a really cool one to start the year. And I just felt like it got me all fired up again about what we do and why we do it. And his energy is just infectious. And it was so cool to learn more and just like sit down and actually talk with him, especially now that they've been going for a few years, about what they're actually doing and why it's important and kind of their next steps. So
yeah, his passion is very infectious. I mean, he really just wants to save the whales. And he works all these different angles of working with these different organizations and bringing people together. I think that's one of his super strengths is that he can talk to he works with the fishermen that may, in some ways, a lot of people think they don't want to go outside of their comfort zone and try these new things. He's able to connect with them and say, like, this is something we can do. We can do this new thing that will be different for you, but will help the whales, but won't be too much of a burden on you. And bridging that gap, and then bridging it with the other technologies that need to be used to be able to mark the gear under the water so that we are able to know where everything is, right? Because that's the biggest thing. If there's no buoy, how do you know where the trap is for regulators, for the fishermen, for anything? So his ability to do that is is amazing. And he's so much fun to talk to. Like you get sucked into, like, as a kid again. You're like, yes, that's right. That's why we do this, to save the animals.
And I think that's why he's such a superstar at communicating with all of these different sectors, because he has such a thoughtful approach. And he's just, like you said, his passion overrides everything. He just wants it to work the best that it can for everybody involved. And I just feel like it's such a refreshing perspective. So yeah, if you have not listened to that one, that's, like I said, I think it's like episode 1 or 2 from this year. It was in the beginning of January that we did that one. So go check that out if you've not listened to it. It's awesome.
This is great. And that just plugs also right now, because we just put our sound trap, our passive acoustic device, because again, going back to him wanting to help the animals, it's not just about getting the fishing gear done. It's about how can we learn about the animals better as well. And so a lot of times when you put passive acoustic devices out, it has to be sitting on a buoy or like hanging from a buoy or something with lines in the water. And so his idea is, well, can we put these acoustic devices out where there is no lines? And so he made a custom rig for our sound trap device that we could just dump off the side of the boat, which is slightly terrifying, but you push it off and then it sinks down and it sits on the bottom. And then it's just like that ripless fishing gear where it has an acoustic trigger that then inflates the bag and lifts it up when we want to retrieve it. And so we get to put these passive acoustic devices out without lines in the water that might entangle up marine animals, including whales. So we had it out last year for our first deployment. We made some improvements. We put it out again in November, and it will be picked up sometime in December. So we're just always very excited to see what sounds we collect and helping in that moving forward, and how can we use this new technology to help with research as well. And he really wants to do that in a larger capacity as well. So yeah, it's just very cool. So
yeah,
I like that you brought that one up.
Yeah. So what was your favorite episode that we did?
So I went to a journal review and a more recent one because if you've listened to the podcast, you know that my side of the research world is really with social structure and behavioral ecology. And I love the idea of culture and the fact that animals have culture, not just people, right? So I went back to the one that we did about the symbols of cultural importance in sperm whales. So the fact that they have that one was by Hal Whitehead, which of course he is kind of a research god in the cetacean world, especially on the topic of culture. And that I will talk a lot about the idea that culture and there there's many things that we say only humans have. And then if you really look, you find that there are more cases of animals showing this. And it's the idea that, are we asking the questions and how we need to ask them for those animals? Or are we asking them in how we think about what intelligence is, what culture is? So it was really exciting for me to read that and have some concrete evidence that, and more people are understanding that these aspects of culture, that animals do have culture, and that we can find the evidence and that people are accepting it.
Yeah, that was a really, really cool one. And especially in sperm whales, because I feel like, again, they're deep divers. They're a large species, but they are deep divers, and it can be harder to study them. So I thought it was a really neat species example too, to actually be looking at sperm whales. And I don't know a ton about sperm whales, so just that in itself was really exciting doing that one.
Sperm whales are so cool.
They're super cool.
So weird looking, cool. And they can do so many cool things, and that they are so social. And that one too was great. Another one about looking at how we can all work together. So it was an ocean basin wide study using many different catalogs and stuff, and looking at those vocalizations. And just the idea that animals have the ability to say, well, yeah, this is me. This is how I'm, you can recognize me by this voice, but I can also categorize you as something else based on your vocalization, based on that symbolism that we also use. And that is culture. And it's just really refreshing to see more and more of that coming out, and recognizing that animals are more complex than we give them credit for. And we're not the top of the animal
intelligence
world
roster.
Yeah, exactly. And so the one thing I like to plug again too, I did it I believe in that episode, was the Franz de Waal book that talks about, the title is "Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are?" And it's just a great idea of like, how are we asking those questions? Like, oh, chimpanzees, they don't know, they can't do facial recognition. Well, because you had them look at people. And to them, all people look the same, whatever. But if you go, oh, let's give them chimpanzees to differentiate, all of a sudden they're experts at it, because that's what they know. That's how we should be asking the questions, and looking at how they live in their world rather than how we do.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's such an important point. I think the other really neat thing about the sperm whale study specifically was just seeing how these different questions are being asked, right? Because like you said, it's all about what question you're asking and how you're asking it. And I think it's really neat to see how people are starting to try to address these questions and like thinking outside the box. And just, it's neat to see how the questions themselves are evolving as people realize more and more like, oh yeah, okay, we have to be more careful about how we're asking these questions, because we can't study XYZ that, we don't have that information for this animal or this species. So how can we get at the same question? So it's always really cool to see in those culture-based papers too, like how are they actually setting up the hypothesis in the first place? Yeah.
Like, how do you,
and just as a science nerd, like I love seeing how people do that, because I'm like, oh, that's such a good way of doing it. Like, I wouldn't have thought of that. Like, that's such a cool way to approach it. So it's just neat to see that too, and like actually, kind of witness the field evolving in that way.
Well, exactly. And I was going to say the evolution of us evolving as scientists, of how we ask these questions, and then that's how science moves forward. Is that you see somebody else do that and go, oh my God, that's a great idea. I can adapt that to this. There's a paper that just came out about, and I haven't read yet, but I'm very excited about using some more sparse data and looking at survivability and how I forgot what the word is now. How long an animal survives in the population when you don't necessarily know when they were born exactly, or the ages of the animals. And so they have this new model, and I'm like, oh, this could be really good for us, because we don't necessarily know when the animals were born, because we can't track them from calves, because harbor porpoises are notoriously hard to ID, especially the younger animals. So it's things like that where it gets you excited. And same thing you said, like, how are they asking this question? Oh, that's cool. How can we adapt that to another species and learn more?
Yeah. Yeah. Good choice. That was a good one.
Thank you. I love, I mean, How I Hit is amazing too. So it's an easy choice for me to go back to. All right. So the next question is a variant of the one we just asked. But what's the coolest thing that we've learned from doing the podcast? And I suppose this could be the coolest information that we've learned, but also in the process of making the podcast. I didn't actually think about it that way. But,
I didn't either. Good point.
But I have two that are kind of similar. So I'll go first on this one just to mix it up. But again, I went more recent. I did look through all the episodes, but the one that came to me the most exciting thing that I learned was the fact that bowhead whales have that complex olfactory bulb, so that they might actually have a sense of smell to some degree. And that just kind of blew my mind. I'm like, what? Why you can't smell in the water? I mean, some can, but like the differences between how big that part of their brain is, and it's absent in most other odontocetes, was just like, why?
Yeah.
Do they have it?
Yeah.
Do they smell krill? Like, what?
So many questions.
Yeah, so many questions. So that one was pretty mind-blowing to me. And then just to stay on that side, so going from olfaction to gustatory or taste, the one about the bottlenose dolphins that can ID individuals with their pee.
That was my one.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. I was like, that one was just like, what? Wait a minute. What? How? Why?
And
wait
why?
a second.
Why would you want to taste pee?
Yeah. That one was crazy to me.
Yeah, and what's funny is that we've kind of thought about it, and when I was at the Wild Dolphin Project, we were thinking about like, are there gustatory constates, since odontostates generally do not have any of the olfactory stuff, as apparently some of the baleen whales do still. But could they be using those like pheromone keys in the water? Can they taste when a female is in estrus? Didn't even think about being able to identify an individual by their pee, but those kind of ideas, like, are they using those cues? That again goes back to what we were just talking about. Are we asking the questions that are relevant to the animals, right? Because we're not going to go swim around and think that we can taste stuff in the water, but maybe they can.
Wouldn't want to.
I know.
Well, that's the thing with that type of question too, because it's so far removed from our way of living and just our lifestyle. Like, those are the types of questions where it just might not occur to us to ask that question, because it's so far removed from anything that we do as humans. We have no context for it at all. So it's another example of like that great question of just like, well, wait a minute, are they doing that?
Yeah.
Like, to think about that in the first place, I'm like, wow.
And who was the person that was like, I wonder if they taste by pee. Let's look at that.
Right? Somebody probably brought it up like over a beer after dinner or something, like, you know what, they probably just like know it's Bob by like tasting the pee, and someone's like, wait a second, that's genius.
So that goes to another one. When I went to one of the conferences in Vancouver one time, there was one that was talking about blue herons eating the juvenile salmon, and that they found all the pit tags in their nest, so that they were actually eating juvenile salmon versus other things. And the guy told the story about them talking. He was talking to another person in the car, and he was like, I'm not getting any information from that the seals are eating them. Like, I can't figure out where these animals are going. And then they, like, off the cuff, was kind of like, well, would it be funny if the birds were eating it? And they're like, wait a minute.
What if the birds are eating it?
The birds are eating it. And then he's like, so if that was the case, like, how would you go about figuring that out? So oftentimes these off the cuff things can end up creating, breakthroughs in research. Yeah. And so we shouldn't just laugh them off. I mean, you can laugh at them, but then be like, oh, but wait a minute.
Right.
Like, it actually
it's also a genius question.
Right. And then how do you ask it? So how do you go about and make that experiment? And for this one, you'd have to do it with animals in captivity, because that's just, so that is one of the benefits. Again, captivity can be very controversial, but there are things that we can learn from those animals that we cannot learn, at least with our technology nowadays, with animals in the wild. So it's an important thing to remember. But so apparently we went with the olfactory and gustatory, the senses part, which I think makes sense, because we don't know a lot about how they do their senses. I mean, even echolocation, like, we know a lot about it, but we still can't replicate it in the way that they can do it. So there's still a lot to learn from the senses of these animals.
Yeah, it's true.
Very cool.
Well, shall we take a quick break and then go into our final two questions?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. We will be right back. All right, we're back. And so the next two questions have more to do with less about the podcast and just about PacMam in general, and the work that we do. So we hope that you stay tuned and are interested in what we're doing, not just what we're talking about on the podcast. But I just pulled up the wrong piece of paper, so I'm going to pull up the other one that has the question. Here we go. So question is, what was your fieldwork highlight for the year? So just to recap, for for those of you who don't know more about what we do, we do research harbor porpoises and harbor seals in the Salish Sea. We are primarily land-based. We do occasionally go out on boats when we can, but most of the time we're sitting on a rock for a couple hours at a time, a few days a week, and observing the harbor porpoises and harbor seals that come through our study area in Burroughs Pass off Anacortes, Washington. And so we do photo ID of both species and observe their behavior and correlate all that information, the environmental information, the behavior, the photo ID, into the different papers that we've published on their behavioral ecology, their foraging ecology, their behavior in general, and their group characteristics and population status kind of things. So that's a little bit about what we're doing. So Kat, what was your favorite time in the field?
Good question. Okay, so I kind of have two. So I'll start off. Okay, good. So I'll start off with the first one, which is kind of cheating because it's not about porpoises or seals. But so we had a field session, I think it was kind of like earlier in this summer, and there was a bunch of volunteers out, and we actually had a gentleman out filming us for a promo video that will be released at some point. And we got down there and kind of got set up, and all of a sudden realized there were about 5 killer whales in the pass right in front of us, which was incredibly exciting. As anyone who has ever seen orcas knows, they're pretty impressive to see, and especially in the pass right there. Like normally, if we're seeing them, it's like out in Rosario Strait, so they're like a mile away, and it's hard to see, and you get like a little tiny dark fin. So it was just very cool to be right there at the right time and actually get some pictures. And I think it was actually the guy that was filming. I think it was his first time ever seeing orcas in the wild.
That's very
so
cool.
Everybody was just kind of freaking out. Yeah. And it was just incredible. So that's number one, because that is pretty rare.
Yeah. Well, and so that's what I was just going to say for listeners, you know, we go out 2 to 3 days a week for the last 8 years, for the most part, you know, depending on weather, but we're consistently out there. And orcas do go through the pass, and we'll hear other people say that they go through it, but we're always like, we are out here more than anybody else. Why don't they come while we were here? They almost never do it, right? Sometimes they'll be like, oh, then the pass, and we have to run out and go, you know, we can get pictures and whatnot, but they're never there like when we're just out doing our thing. So for them to show up when we're out there for those 2 hours is exceptional.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then my other one, which actually was just recently, was a very cute little seal who was trying to finagle about a 3-foot fish, which was, I mean, I'm assuming it was a salmon. I don't actually know what type of fish it was, but it was a massive fish. And it just, I mean, it's kind of silly sounding, but it was just so crazy to watch him try to, like, I was going to say manhandle, but like seal handle this fish. I like, he's like, yes, I got it. Shoot, what do I do with it? And you could just like, all the gulls were kind of like descending and like kind of hovering around, like, okay, you better drop it. We're going to grab little pieces. And this poor little seal, this kept with this, you know, this massive fish in its mouth, just kept popping his head up being like, help. I don't know what to do now. It was so,
the dog that caught the car, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. But I've never seen one catch a fish quite that big. So that was pretty neat.
Well, and then they have, you know, remember they're seals, so they don't have long foreflippers. Like they're just these little things. So sometimes they'll grab it.
So
like
they kind of do this, like yeah, he was trying that technique, but it was like so much of the fish underneath it still that he was like, he couldn't get a good grip. I don't think it was just fun to watch him try to struggle.
Struggle to do that. So mine's similar. I thought you were gonna go with Calypso in particular.
No, I did not.
But this is very similar because it could have been Calypso that was doing that. Who knows? But we did have, this is over multiple days and weeks that we did see this one. We would see this animal and he would be real close to us under the rock. So it's not uncommon for us to see seals that are that close. And oftentimes they will grab a big fish that's really close and we get to see that. But this was consistently. So like as soon as one would pop up like right below us and he'd be like looking at us. I say he, I don't know, it's a he or she. I just don't like saying it. But it became clear that each time that one that came up real close, it was most likely this one seal. And so we had another person that was out that took a picture of the seal and had really great pictures. And so we let her name it. And she came up with a great name. His name is Calypso. It's a great name. And especially with this character, because he's very charismatic. Because again, he pops up and is like, hey, what are you doing? And sometimes 2 or 3 times during a session. And then like 3 or 4 times within a couple week period, if the animal is coming up that close with a large fish, it was Calypso. And one time, I think we saw 2 large fish catches. It was 2 different fish in the same time. So I'm like, well, he's very well fed, first of all.
So obviously pretty good at his foraging or its foraging.
Like, he's doing well. Whoever, other seals need to learn from that one, apparently. And then the one time it was really cool is that there was another seal that wanted the fish that Calypso caught. And so he went behind the alcove behind us, and I saw these gulls go real close to the rocks where we were, which is a little unusual. Really interested. So I was like, I got up and I was like, I'm going to go over and look. And they were thrashing at each other. So when we look at the pictures, we realized that Calypso had gotten the fish, but when I took the pictures, the other seal had the fish. So Calypso was like, excuse me.
Right.
That's my fish. So
not for you.
Yeah, it was really neat to see, and I got some good pictures of it. So you can look on our Facebook page for those. But that was really interesting because you don't really see a lot of interaction between seals in the water.
Yeah.
And this was definitely, and there's a couple of other times we saw another one like following him. So I think maybe that other seals are like, that guy's really good. Maybe I could just steal his fish.
Right. I mean, I was going to say, like, they're taking your advice. They're like, all right, we're just going to job shadow the seal and just like check it out. And watch the master at work.
Right. And we'll either learn from what he's doing or steal it if he allows. Yeah. So I think Calypso ended up getting the fish back, but who knows what happened after they dove off. But it's always fun when you see the animals that close, and they don't always come that close to us below us on the rocks, but it was very, very fun. And then the other one that I had to do relates kind of to what the next question that we're going to ask, which I'll mention when we do that. But was I've been going back and forth between the desert and Washington State for various reasons. But it was one of the last days I was going to be out in the field before going to the desert, which is very deserty, and I don't love it. So, but it was a really active field day. Like, there's lots going on. And then there was a mating attempt, and I got it on camera. And so it's always exciting when we get mating attempts on camera, because there's no real prequel to it. It's not like, oh, something's going to happen, let me track. It's just, you have the camera in the right spot and they happen to jump.
And these are like, just for context, these are like 2 seconds. Right. It's like a 2-second activity.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So lots of times
blink and you'll miss it, literally.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that I got that, and it was pretty close, it was in C2, which if you're familiar with our locations, that's pretty close to where we're sitting. So it was a good picture, and I think that might be the one. I'll talk about it in a minute. But so anyway, it was exciting because I got the mating picture in the first place. Exciting because it was close and clear. And I think we knew the animals as well.
That's always
during
cool.
that sighting, which is another thing. And then that was like the last session I had before going to the desert for a while. So that was just
all the boxes,
right? check. It was great.
Nice.
So we get to see lots of cool stuff in the field. So we've seen orcas, we see other marine mammals, including seals and sea lions, and other cetaceans sometimes, and then our own subject matter, the seals and porpoises. So it's always a good time, even if it's not as exciting as some of those times as other stuff.
Yeah,
it's just fun to be out there. And so if you're around in our area and you are interested, please email us, because we do take volunteers out and help us collect the data. So if you want to see what we're talking about, you're more than welcome. So that's
last question.
Yes, the last question. It is related to, and this could be a variety of things, but what are you most excited about PacMam in 2023? So what are we most excited for the next year of what we're doing? What's going to happen?
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun. So I guess since we're going back and forth, I'll start with, did I start this one, or did you start? Yeah, you started.
I think I started.
So this links to the mating that we just did. I think that the picture I took that day might be the one that's going into our chapter on mating behavior of porpoises that we are co-authors with quite a few other people. But mainly the primary author, the first author on this chapter is our colleague from the Marine Mammal Center in California. So this has been a paper that's been in the works for years, because they were the first ones to describe the mating behavior. And that when we went to a conference down there, we were like, oh, that's what we're seeing. Oh my God, that's what when they're flying out of the water, that's what they're doing. And so this goes back to that science, right? Understanding more by working together. And so we've been discussing with them since we're on the same coast and we both doing porpoises and we're both doing behavior and we have a good platform for getting this information. We've been in working closely with them in looking at mating behavior worldwide. So their idea was, is this mating behavior, is this just population specific or is this a worldwide harbor porpoise behavior that happens? And so the last two conferences, we had a poster with them and they were putting information out for let's get as many people as we can with pictures and descriptions either showing or not showing that this behavior is the same worldwide. And so it's been, like I said, it's been years that it's been in the works, and we've had a really good opportunity to have it in one of our other colleagues that works with them as well, was putting together a book about sex in cetaceans. So
timely, very
right, timely, and the perfect place to put our chapter, do a chapter about porpoises. So it is a chapter about porpoises in general, but basically we don't know anything or very little about most other porpoises' reproduction and sexual behavior. We actually know more about harbor porpoises, even though we still don't know a lot about harbor porpoises. In comparison, we know more about their behaviors than we do about other species. So it's kind of a general overview of porpoises, with emphasis with harbor porpoises because of what we know. So I think the picture that one of our pictures got put in as one of the pictures for description of the behavior. And I think it might be that one. I can't remember.
Nice.
Sure, but anyway. So I'm excited for that to come out. That should be coming out in the earlier part or mid next year. It's gone through the reviews and all that, but so I'm very excited for that to come out because it's a big thing for the species, and it was so exciting to be a part of, and just be a part of. Like, we worked closely with our colleagues in Marine Mammal Center, but there are many other co-authors from around the world. So we reviewed videos and got to discuss with other people around the world, and that was just really fun. And I hope that continues. And I think we all do. We've all been talking about we need to have like a porpoise group that meets up, virtually, every so often, just to kind of discuss and talk about, again, how science moves forward. Like, well, what are you seeing out in the Black Sea? What are you seeing over in the Atlantic versus the Pacific? And just having those discussions, I'm excited for.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the really cool things about what this created is, like, yes, like you said, it was literally years. I mean, I think the idea was first brought up at that conference in San Francisco. So that was like 2015 that conference happened. So, I mean, we've been bandying the idea around for like almost, like 7 years now, but I think that was one of the coolest things that has come out of this, is just building those connections and creating space for people to talk about their research and explore and have more context for what they're seeing and their different study sites too, which has been really neat. And especially for us, harbor porpoises are very understudied in a lot of ways. And so I think it's been really, really encouraging to see some of these other studies that people are doing and footage that has been contributed to. It's like, okay, people are actually looking, even if it's aside to their main study or whatever it is, like just knowing that people's eyes are on the water and looking for harbor porpoises was also pretty encouraging. So
yeah, and getting to see some of that drone footage. The Denmark, I think, are like the leaders in the drone footage section of harbor porpoises.
That was super cool.
Oh my gosh, it put a whole new perspective on the behavior, like viewing it.
It was really, really neat.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm
so I think for me, I'm excited about, so again, kind of, it's hard to pick one. So I'm gonna kind of do a twofold, but okay. I'm very excited to get our PAM device back again. So if you guys know anything about our organization, like acoustics is more my background. So I'm really excited to continue playing with that and figure out making sure that we're getting it in, deploying it in the right spot. We're still kind of in the development phase with this of learning exactly where in the past we need to be putting this device to get the best recordings and to get the highest likelihood of actually catching any vocalizations. So I'm excited to get this back and see what new information we've captured in there. Because it's such a huge part of their everyday life. I mean, as we all know, being surrounded by sound makes a big difference as to how you feel every day. So it's really neat to yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's the thing. Even if we're not catching vocalizations of harbor porpoises, because they are high frequency vocalizers, which means they have to vocalize basically at the microphone for it to be picked up. So it's maybe less likely that we're going to get those, especially initially. But just knowing what they're experiencing in their environment, I think it's always been something that's fascinated me with acoustics, where you can actually hear what the animal's hearing. And that just blows my mind. I'm like, wow, I feel like a dolphin right now because I'm just listening to underwater noise. This
you're
is so
put
cool.
in their position. And again, that goes back to what we talked about before, like putting yourselves in the shoes or the flippers of the animals that you're talking about. So like you can discuss like, oh yeah, it's loud, but like listen to how loud it is.
Yeah, exactly. And even like certain, that's, and one of the other really cool things with the passive acoustic study is that we can correlate that from when we're out in the field. So we know, like if we're hearing certain things, we can make a note like, oh, this, there was a lot of boat traffic this day, and I can then go cross correlate that with the pound device recording and see how loud it was in the underwater sphere. So I'm super excited to continue developing that and moving that project forward. And with that, also really excited to continue expanding our educational offerings. So we do, like Cindy mentioned, we do offer volunteer positions and also internships. And we've been really lucky in the last couple of years to have grown our volunteer and internship base substantially in the last few years.
And one of the that was my add-on.
See, there we go. See, I know. And that's the thing, because it relates to all of it. So I mean, I think like it's been really exciting, especially as a small nonprofit, that we've grown from nothing. It's been really exciting to just see more and more people finding out about us and reaching out and wanting to experience time in the field with us and learn more about harbor porpoises and harbor seals. And it's neat to see some of the potential interns coming in and going like, "Ooh, I was looking at your acoustic project and that looks really exciting." So
we have quite a few.
That's another thing. Yeah. So that's another thing that I think will be really neat to just continue to grow that program in 2023 and continue offering these, basically like hands-on, very practical experiences that, especially if you're planning on going into the marine mammal field or marine science field, having practical experience under your belt is key.
Huge.
So I love that we're able to offer that to people, and it's just been really neat to connect with lots of different individuals too through that. It's always really cool.
Yeah, we've had a large range, and these are people that are just finding us. We're not putting out calls for interns. We are getting between 1 and 3 for each quarter of the year that are interested in working with us, and so I've been very excited about that. And like I said, that was my kind of second add-on was excited to see who else comes out and the experiences that we can give them, and also that we learn from them as well, from the experiences that they have. And even actually, so on that, our work with our colleagues in the Marine Mammal Center, they also, one of them does work up in Alaska, and we have an intern that was with us that went up there, so we were able to give a good recommendation for her to go up there, and they've been really happy having her there. We were just discussing stuff about a photo ID catalog that they're starting up there, and they had some great ideas. I was like, oh my God, that's a great idea. I'm going to use that for our ID catalog. And so, they're using our ideas and then moving forward. And then I go, oh, that's great. We can use that idea. And so it's that we're learning from them as well as them learning from us. But so that's exciting. Science, you have, the more you know, you don't know, right? So the more just exciting to learn more. And that comes from many different avenues, but from the animals and also from the people that we work with. And so, and just the fact that we have just more and more interest. And so I'm excited what they can help us with too, right? We have so much data that we can't go through ourselves. And so having students that are excited and help us work through that data, there's just so much more that we can produce and learn about the animals. And that's what we're all about, right? So
yeah.
Volunteers and interns helping us do that.
Yeah, lots to look forward to.
Yeah, and more exciting. What's going to happen in the field, right?
I mean, always. That's just like the constant. That's like from week to week. It's like, well, what's this week going to be? Who knows?
Exactly. And on that too, it has been exciting. We have been able to identify more individuals in the field, which is very difficult to do with porpoises. But we do have a few regulars where like, oh, it's that one. Oh, is that one here too? Oh, okay, yeah. So you'll see we have posted stuff about Pointer. She's a female that has very, very consistently been in the field. And so it's been exciting to be able to know those individuals now that we can kind of identify based on their markings. So
yeah,
it's just fun being out there with our friends and our volunteers and our interns and the animals that we're getting to know and love, and hopefully don't get eaten by orcas. Which, I mean, they're it's part of the food chain, so that's fine. But but that's also another thing, like being able to know sometimes at some point, I think we're going to be able to identify an individual from an aerial photograph of them being tossed in the air, and we'd know more about that individual and then when they died, that kind of thing. So that kind of information, even though sad, is important as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
Lots of cool stuff. And we could just keep talking, because I would, about all the cool things that we can learn. And
it's true. But we should probably wrap this up.
Right, we should. We do have a great time out in the field, and we do love the sharing it with everybody, whether that's through education, those hands-on education stuff that Kat was talking about, but in the social media and also the papers that we publish. So we hope that you will continue to join us on this journey that we do with the podcast, and join us on social media so you can see what we're doing in the field. And we did just a plug. We have dipped our toes into the reels on Instagram. So check those out. We've been having a lot of fun with that, and we're hoping to produce more of those in 2023 as well. So let us know what you want to see too, because we're open to, what does everybody want to learn about. So with that, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can check out our website. We do have merchandise as well. Another way to support us is through the merchandise. We have some great new, not logos, designs. There we go. Designs that are really, really cool, and different options for to buy them. Tote bags and mugs and shirts and hoodies and things like that. So check those out. You can find those on our website as well. So with that, we hope you have a wonderful holiday season, no matter what holiday you do or do not celebrate the time of year, this winter time of year. We hope you have a lot of time with friends and family, and however you choose to celebrate the time. And we will see you again in the new year in 2023, which is just bonkers.
We'll see you there.
Lies. Yes, we will see you then. Have a great holiday, and we'll see you in January. Bye.
Bye.
This was brought to you by Pacific Mammal Research, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Check out our website, www.pacmam.org, that's PACMAM, to learn more about us, our research, and the educational opportunities that we provide. Also, help us continue providing fun and educational content like this by donating today. Your help is how we can continue to do our work and share it with you. Thanks.
Welcome to the PacMam
Bloopers reel.
The end of the year.